Welcome, everybody. My name is Klaas van der Tempel. I'm a program maker at Studium Generale of the TU Delft. I'm your host today and moderator during this lunch lecture, which is unfortunately online, but I'm sure you all understand that we had to do it this way because of the current COVID situation. This is part 3, if I remember correctly, of the Spotting Bullshit lecture series. Today we have invited someone who is actually a professional bullshit spotter, Shannon Bakker, who is a fact checker for NU.nl, which is a popular Dutch news website. And when we were preparing this series, and it's all over the place. We're talking about fallacious logic. We're talking about how the media works. We're talking about troll armies, and we're going to end with deep fakes. But one of the questions that I had personally was, in this media landscape, with all the bullshit that we are confronted with in society, how do fact checkers actually do their work? And that's why we asked Shannon to join us today and tell us a bit about her work, how she goes about it. Just, wakes up, have a cup of coffee, sits down behind her computer and does what? Okay, so she's going to give us a lecture on that. It's going to take maybe half an hour, after which we will have time for questions. You can also ask questions in between. If you'd like, you can put those in the chat and I will ask them out loud. This whole lecture is being recorded. It's going to be put on YouTube. The question and answer session at the end as well. But don't worry, your name and your face will not show up online in the recording. So yeah, don't have any privacy concerns about that. Without any further ado, I would like to give the word to Shannon, and I'm really curious to hear what your life is like as a professional fact checker.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. I'm going to quickly share my screen so you can see my presentation. We disabled participant screen sharing. Oh, that's something we I get host disabled participant screen sharing.
That's my mistake. I forgot to make you co-host. I've done that now.
Yes, all right. Share. There we are. And then I want to, yes. All right. Yes, as Klaas mentioned, I'm going to tell you how I fact check and what challenges I find when I'm fact checking, and why we fact check. Because we started about 3 years ago with a fact checking unit at NU.nl. We are the biggest news site in the Netherlands at the moment, and we started as a Facebook collaboration. Facebook was searching for partners in the Netherlands who could fact check content for them, and we applied for that together with the University of Leiden. And I have personally been fact checking for 2 years almost on the Facebook program. Last year we quit this program because of concerns about what we could and what we couldn't fact check. We weren't allowed to fact check politicians, for example. So that's why we decided we wanted to quit the Facebook partnership, but we're still fact checking. I'm still doing that every day, just with other methods and not posting it on Facebook in this partnership. And I'm going to take you through what I do. First, I'll slightly tell you a bit about myself and my background. When I was in middle school, I had, well, probably most of the same subjects you had, like physics and chemistry and like the more technical subjects, but instead of doing medicine like my friends, I wanted to be a journalist. So I started with a bachelor in communication and information sciences, and I did a master in journalism, and I focused myself on data journalism. I worked at the research department of RTL News as a data journalist for over a year, where we would analyze data sets or ask the government for new data or collect them in any other way and make our own subjects and news reports on the basis of that. And after that, I was already really busy with being very factual with numbers. So fact checking was a very sort of natural next step for me, and that's what I told, I'm part of New Checks for almost 3 years now, and being a fact checker on a daily basis. Why do we still continue fact checking at NU.nl, and why especially do we choose to fact check social media? Well, one of the foremost reasons is that at the moment, we are still the only big news outlet in the Netherlands who's doing this on a regular basis. And we think it's important that besides politicians and other media, also social media gets fact-checked, because a lot of people see it, and research is still developing in this part, but especially on like the health part, we believe it can do harm. If people believe that you should inject bleach against the coronavirus, that can have real world harm. So that's why we also focus, especially when we're checking social media, on health and health-related questions. That's also why we focus a lot on the coronavirus, because we think if people misunderstand or get false information, that can influence their behavior in the real world. And our goal is to help those in doubt. If you get a weird message from your friend through WhatsApp or on Facebook, we want you to be able to find out if it's real or not. If you Google, you have to be able to find our fact check, and so you can tell whether it's true or not. So we're not there to convince the hardliners that Bill Gates wants to microchip you with the coronavirus vaccine. We want to give you some context if you happen to cross this information. I think, where does this come from? Is there some truth? We want people to be able to answer these kind of questions with our fact-checking department. And our fact-checking department, I'm talking about the department, but at the moment that's only me. So I'm doing this by myself, and sometimes with help from other editors at NU.nl, and I get a lot of tips from our reaction platform, NuJ, and the editors there will help me surfacing possible mis and disinformation. And that's where we go to next slide. One of my biggest challenges is to surface possible mis and disinformation that's going on social media. I have lists of accounts where I know that often spread possible untruths and stuff like that, but still it's really hard to quickly spot what is going viral, what big misinformation is going on. So that's still my the hardest part of my job, to be honest. Luckily, we get a lot of readers who email me, like, I got this text from my friends, can you check it? And often I get the same email like 5 or 10 times. So then I sort of get a sense that it's really like quite big and getting around. So that really helps. And indeed, our reaction platform, NuJ, is also really valuable to see what misunderstandings are among our readers. But that what I would say is like the hardest part of my job. And after I found something which you think, oh, that's pretty big, it's been shared maybe 2,000 times or even 10,000 times, I don't trust it, because that's how I select. Of course, when readers distrust information, that can be a reason to go check something. But other than that, you also slightly have to go on your gut feeling, like, this doesn't sound reasonable or might be fake or something like that. So it's also a bit of your own judgment that you need to use. And when I've chosen a subject, the first thing I always do is check the source. If it's a text, where does it come from? Is there a sort of original? And if this what kind of site is this original text on? Because quite often that are satire sites that are very clear on their own website that they are satire, but these articles land somewhere else or in the context of Facebook, and then people take it as it were true. So and also with pictures, check when it's first posted online. Sometimes people claim that a picture is really recent, of a recent demonstration or stuff like that. But in reality, the picture is already 10 years old and has been online for 10 years. So those are like the really easy steps that you try to check first. If the subject is of a more scientific, like new research has found that viruses don't exist. Well, then first I want to see which research is behind that, of course. And quite often, if you see the original paper and read it, you can already conclude, hey, this wasn't what the researchers concluded, or there are a lot of limitations and stuff like that. So that's when it's a more scientific subject and they talk about a specific paper, specific new research. I'll always try to find that new research. And sometimes after like these logical steps, I still can't determine whether it's true or not, or somewhere in between. And that's where I call experts, mostly indeed scientists. Last half year, I took talks with a lot of microbiologists and other doctors and people in the in medicine on the coronavirus, and what experts can offer is they often know like a good overview of their work and the field they work in. So they know if something, mostly they're really good in helping you determine whether something is likely or unlikely. Because of course, you can have a conclusion where it's false or true, but there's a huge variation in between, especially with like a lot of statements are, I can't for 100% sure say that the coronavirus isn't manufactured in a lab, but it's highly unlikely considering everything we know. So that's often also a conclusion. So I'm quite specific in the words I use there, because I never went to make something like a statement that is untrue myself, of course. So that's where I'm really careful at. And after I collected all the information, I of course need to write an article because it has to be published on our news website. And what I find really important there is indeed that the reader can follow all the steps that I've taken in checking the statements. So which experts have I called? If there's a research paper, then there must be a link to that research paper in my article. So the reader can essentially do my own research themselves, can understand how I got to my final conclusion, and then indeed in my conclusion really concise with which words I use and what is correct. And I want to take you slightly in a bit of a overview of the last more than half a year for me, because coronavirus has really been quite exceptional on the fact-checking and fake news department. There was always like mistakes in on social media. We already had a sort of anti-vax movement on social media, but it was never, since I've been working, I haven't seen such a huge amount of misinformation, disinformation, and fake news. So I want to take you through what I've seen for the past few months. Well, it started out with most mistakes and fake news that was directly related to China, was often coming from the US. And it was indeed about, is the virus manufactured? Is it a bioweapon? Or is that kind of, that's sort of where it started. And then we got the first infection in the Netherlands. And then a lot of, especially school kids, I suppose, I don't know for 100% sure, we're making this kind of jokes like there's one coronavirus case at our school, so our school is closed for the next 2 weeks. That kind of information was going around really often. Also, restaurants or universities, we saw that constantly, that kind of misinformation. And what we also really saw in the beginning were all kind of weird health advices. Like you have to sip a bit of water every 15 minutes. And if you do so, you can't get coronavirus. or you have to take like absurd amounts of vitamin C and then you won't get ill. And that kind of health advices, we saw that really often, like especially at the beginning. And I must say they have sort of automatically or gone away. And now, especially in the summer, there were more misinformation and discussion about how does the virus spread? Is there a virus? That, like, I can't believe how often I still see that, or that the coronavirus isn't isolated yet. That kind of misinformation. Also, there's a lot of misinformation about mutations and whether the coronavirus is mutated in something that's not dangerous or extremely dangerous and that kind of stuff. And that's also the reason why I started during the coronavirus to not only write like the traditional fact check articles with the cool new check, but also more you need explaining articles like what are mutations, which mutations of a virus are meaningful. And this kind of explanation to also, you need help researchers in a much broader sense, or help readers in a much broader sense than just like fact-checking one statement, but also trying to address slightly the bigger issues where there are a lot of misunderstanding. So that's basically what I've been doing for the past half year. I don't think I fact-checked anything that was not on the coronavirus in this time. And we have made a sort of fake news overview where we collected everything that was actually fake news. That's might be good to explain. So I use the terms fake news and disinformation and misinformation. With fake news, I mean information that has been deliberately made and that is deliberately false. If I speak, and that's largely the same as disinformation, and misinformation is just untrue information. In my context, I know there are different definitions. I use fake news quite sparsely because I think it's important that a mistake or saying something that's wrong accidentally isn't automatically labeled as fake news, because I don't think these things are the same. So that's why I use different terms. And luckily, I had the chance to work with some students last month, and they also brought me a guide on how not only we as fact checkers can fact check information, but how people who have less time, probably like you guys, can also do a really quick fact check when they see something on Twitter or Facebook that they don't trust. And I think I wanted to share the most important tips. On the first tip, which is also a bit about what we do, is there are worldwide, there are more than 100 fact checkers. If you see something that you don't trust, please Google first if a fact checker has written on it, because often, especially with US elections, for example, I think there are over 40 fact checkers working on the US election, and on coronavirus, there are even more fact checkers worldwide. We have a sort of big international fact-checking network, the IFCN, where you can find in English short short text on every fact check, whether it's written in Spanish or Dutch or whatever language. So that's definitely my first tip. If you don't trust something, and you should not trust something when it's really appealing to your emotions, because that's when fake news is deliberately spread. It's mostly manufactured to appeal to your message, like, oh, this can't be true, I'm going to share it. But if that's your first reaction, you should check it first. And other than that, of course, you can like do a quick search on what the source is. If they say there's a big fire, for example, in The Hague or in Delft, check if there are other news outlets who are saying the same story, because probably if it's real, they are. And also look at the way, if it's on a website, check what kind of website you're looking at. Does it look really dodgy? then you should be a bit more careful with what you see. So those are my most important tips. I think it's good if we do some questions now. I have no idea how long I've been talking. I don't think that long.
No, we're only 20 minutes in. But I've been writing down lots of questions. But yeah, other people, if you want to ask questions either directly to Shannon, you can unmute yourself, or otherwise type your question in the chat and I will ask it out loud. Yeah, there's so many questions come up in my mind. Just to kick it off, are you exhausted after every single day? It sounds like so much work to do.
Well, I would say, like, especially at the beginning, I was really, like, in March, April, I was completely exhausted, but now I sort of accepted the fact a bit more that I can't fact check everything that's going around, because indeed I'm by myself, so we need to make a selection, and quite often we're able to do that to distinguish what is really big and what needs to be addressed now, and what's slightly lower priority, and maybe we can just see whether it gets bigger or not before we write in articles.
Right, so you have a pretty reliable methodology. So you're not just randomly scouring the internet and hoping that you run into something that's obviously bullshit. But I mean, you mentioned that NU.nl is the only one that's fact-checking in the Netherlands the way that they are, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah, we're like the only big name news outlets at the moment. Facebook also has a partnership with AFP, the press bureau. So AFP is doing that also in Dutch for Facebook at the moment. So they're sort of doing the same work.
So does that not make you feel like you're fighting a losing battle if there's so few fact checkers and there's so much fake news out there?
Well, I think sometimes it does feel like that. Like, why can people continue to believe certain stuff? And it's often after I wrote a fact check. But then again, that's why I explain. I try to focus on that we can't convince everyone that something is fake. We try to convince those people that see something for the first time, are in doubt, and we want to help them. And I think that's sort of the goal I need to keep in my mind, to not feel overwhelmed. That we're not going to eradicate fake news in the Netherlands. That's not going to happen. But what we can do is help those that are in doubt.
Right. Do you think that fact checking should be something that is, as it currently seems to be, in the private realm, or should government be investing in this as well? Like, if there were a government job for fact checking, there were a whole bureau with just hundreds of them that did that every day like you are doing, would you take that job as well?
I don't know, because the hard part is that, especially among people that distrust vaccines, for example, there's also a lot of distrust towards the government. And then a private source can be slightly more seen as slightly more reliable than a state-funded department or whatever. So that's what I find quite difficult, because we are already like always explaining that. That's why I'm so transparent in how I do my job, because I want people to be able to check what I'm doing. But also, I get quite often emails that say, "Oh, you're paid by the government or pharmacy or that kind of stuff." So I think it's even harder to also be. You're probably independent, but to be independent for the reader and that the reader perceives you as independent, that's, I think, even harder if your fact checking department is state funded.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that kind of lays bare the underlying issue of trust in society, and trust in media, journalism, trust in government. I wonder, have you ever had contact with people who, like, actual sources of fake news, not just, I spotted some picture that's, clearly bullshit, something that was posted 10 years ago and someone's pretending that it's right now. do you have any insight into the psychology of people who are making these things? I mean, you mentioned school children, teenagers that are just having a blast, right? They don't maybe understand or maybe don't care about the consequences of spreading fake news.
Yeah, well, I had contact with, that's already 2 years ago, with what in Dutch we call bulk news sites, which are news sites that just get a lot of like small sort of news articles that are really good for Facebook, that get a lot of engagement, but they don't check whether it's true. They just they don't have a journalist as we do at NU.nl. So they place everything goes online what they think, oh, that will get a lot of clicks. And like the model there, it really is also to get as much money with as little effort. And I must say that this kind of news sites I'm seeing less, partly because of the algorithms of Facebook are getting better at detecting this kind of behavior. But yeah, I must say they were sort of aware, but then again, they say, yeah, but you as NU.nl also started out small, and maybe we get more reliable if we get bigger. But they didn't seem to be really concerned. They were more concerned about making money than on what they're spreading. I must say, sometimes it was harmful, but quite often it was untrue, but I didn't quite see how harmful it was. So that's also a difference, I think, in responsibility, whether it's harmful or not, or whether it's just untrue.
Right. Okay, we have a question in the chat from Sana asking, she says, last week we had a lecture on troll armies. One of their tactics of troll armies online is to spread as many messages as possible. So I get like an overload of disinformation. Do you have any experience fighting against that?
No, we have been looking into it. We have not in the Netherlands seen it on a very large scale. We had some deliberate spread, not a troll army, but really deliberate spread of a lot of fake news on the Black Pete discussion. In the end, that was indeed a person that was behind that and making all that kind of stuff up with after a colleague of mine exposed that. So that's what we're seeing, but we're not like especially focused on the Netherlands. We're not seeing that many trolls. I know there are some, but not like this big army which has a huge influence. It might come in the future. I haven't seen it just yet.
Perhaps the Dutch market isn't big or interesting enough yet to invest in a troll army.
Yeah, because we have seen it like on the subject of MH17, but then it was more focused on the Russian public or in English. So that's the Dutch subject, that the trolls or the misinformation wasn't meant for the Dutch public.
You mentioned that you have sort of a hierarchy of truth, or that's what I'm calling it. That
yeah.
you distinguish between information that's obviously false or proven true, and then there was likely and unlikely. That a lot of it, I would assume, you said it comes down to gut feeling, maybe common sense as well. And you have a clear methodology that you've developed to do that. But have you ever made mistakes? Have you ever labeled something wrong and been called on it yourself? Has someone fact-checked you?
No, we have had a discussion once where there was indeed discussion whether it was unlikely or slightly more likely. That was on an article of colleagues of us, of the Telegraaf, on how bad for the environment cow meat was. So we had a pretty big discussion on that, but I think we toned it down slightly in our conclusion there after a lot of discussion. So it was not that I made like huge mistake, but after like more discussion and stuff like that, we felt like, okay, maybe it's better to instead of highly unlikely to quote unlikely. So that, of course, is subject to discussion, but that's the only one I can recall where after discussion such a change has been made.
We have, a couple more. Someone's asking if you could stop sharing the screen. That's a good point. If you can stop the share screen, then I can.
Let's see where stop share. Yeah.
There. Okay. Then let's go to gallery view because we have more questions. We have a question from Siva. Siva, do you want to ask this question out loud or shall I read it out for you? Oh, mic isn't working. Okay, I'm going to read it out loud. Siva asks, do you think that fact-checking is always effective? And related to what you said about people accusing you of being paid, for example, by the government, don't you think that people that believe in this information will reject your fact-checking anyways, for example, by accusing you of being fake media?
Yeah.
How should we deal with that?
Yeah, that's definitely a problem, and that's why I said we're not going to convince the hardliners. In my mailbox, there are quite a lot of people who say, indeed, you're fake news. I don't believe what you're writing and that kind of stuff. Your sources are incorrect. So I know that I'm not going to convince, but quite often we also get emails of people that say, hey, do you want to check whether it's true? I don't know. And after I send them, hey, thanks for the tip. I've written an article and they're often quite grateful for it. And they said, oh, I told my aunt that it works like this. And I think that's what we're doing it for. So indeed, we're not going to eradicate, we're not going to convince everyone that believes in things that aren't true. But I think we can help like quite a big part of our audience with fact checking.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question to this myself. I guess I already sort of asked it, when I asked, have you ever made a mistake? Has anyone ever fact-checked you? But this is one of those, roller coasters of, who's watching the watchmen, who's fact-checking the fact-checkers. Again, there's this trust issue, right? You are one of the few people doing this in this country. And even if you do your job perfectly, there can still be this issue of mistrust, emotions, like you said, coming up. Yeah. Is there any oversight? I don't really know how to formulate my question here, but do you get what I'm trying to say? Like, you're kind of on your own. There's nobody. Is there anyone backing you or checking?
Well, of course, we have like the whole NU.nl that's sort of behind. Like, if I make a mistake, that NU.nl has a mistake. I'm really happy that I'm not doing this independently.
Right.
And that we have this news outlet. With indeed also, if I'm in doubt, I have my editors who I talk to. Like, do you think this is the right conclusion based on what I know? So that's, of course, it's not that I'm selecting what I'm going to check largely by myself. But if I'm in doubt, or if there's I don't know if I explained this right, or do you think I have enough sources for this fact check? Of course, I talk to my colleagues and they help me with what I'm doing. So not completely. Yeah, I have this whole news outlet behind me. I think that helps a lot.
Right. Okay. So you're not isolated. What about other fact checkers, whether that be in the Netherlands or abroad? Is there some kind of network of fact checkers that you can check on? Oh, well, this has already been checked, or hasn't been yet.
Yeah. Well, members of the it's called IFCN. That's an international fact check network. To be a member, you need to have some quality standards and stuff like that. And sometimes, especially, I think I had it on an Italian subject, when there's something going around here in the Netherlands, which is related to something that supposedly happened in Italy, I can contact my colleagues there, hey, do you know what's going on there, whether it's true or not? And I had some Danish people ask me about this, and you hate that we're falling out of the tree, supposedly due to 5G. And indeed, IFCN also has some toolboxes, like what I was talking about. They have a toolbox of all fact checks on Corona made by members, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's quite a good network among like international fact checkers.
Someone is asking in the chat, what's the name of this network? Does it have?
It's called, if you would look for, it's IFCN.
IFCN. Okay.
Yeah, International Fact Checking Network.
Excellent. We have another question from Aisha. Is the main reason that fake news is made the money that can be made with clicks, or is it mainly to confuse people for political reasons, for example?
I don't know.
Is it money or power? Money or power?
No, I think that it's really hard to pinpoint because no one has the complete overview of all the fake news that has been made. That would be an incredibly interesting research subject if you had it. Of course, we saw during not the recent elections, but the elections before that, we saw in the US. For the first time, we saw fake news on a quite large scale to make money. Or in Macedonia, I think, were quite young people that were making fake news for money quite often. But of course, we have seen some examples of like politically motivated fake news by Russia and stuff like that. But for the Netherlands, I would say I'm not really, either I don't know, but I'm not seeing that politically motivated fake news, but in the past I have seen the financially motivated fake news. But then again, I don't know who is behind some of the news sites that I'm checking, so I can't be 100% sure.
What would be your priority when you're checking? I mean, right now, obviously, health is a huge concern because if there's misinformation, what did you mention? People saying that you should put bleach in your blood so that you can fight off coronavirus. Do you if it's fake news about celebrities or fake news about coronavirus or something political, how do you prioritize what you check?
Well, if it would logically can have real life consequences, that is sort of the first most basic rule. So indeed, that's mostly health concern, but there are some other subjects on security, for example, that are in like the same area. And other than that, it's indeed also misinformation about the debates that is going on in the Netherlands, especially I had quite some fact checks on nitrogen and farmers. Because before Corona, that was the most heated sort of debate in the Netherlands. And if we want this debate to be made on facts and not on misinformation. So that's also what we find relevant things to check.
Right.
And and climate. That's one more that's quite important for NU.nl.
Yes, let's not forget about the climate. One of our many crises.
Yes.
You mentioned, Shannon, before we started that you have a bit of a bonus, right? Because we do have some time.
I have one example of quite an older thing I checked. It was in a ladies' magazine. I start sharing my screen again. It's a research-related question, and I'm curious if you guys can come up with what has gone wrong in this article. If it's not clear, please let me know. Share. Yeah. So this was the conclusion of this popular women's magazine, that American research has shown that being lazy is healthy. But, well, I can already say that was not what the research actually was, what the subject was of the research where this article is based on. Do you guys have any idea where this research, what kind of research could this have been and how they have come to this conclusion? it's one of my favorite examples of research completely being taken out of context.
Are you asking like who would have funded research that led
No,
to?
not who have funded. No, like, all right, that might be easier. I'm going to explain what has happened here. Like they say the conclusion that being lazy is healthy. But the research that lies beneath it wasn't on being lazy, it was on slow metabolism. So how quickly your body works. But then again, the reason research wasn't even on humans, but on ancient sea creatures that have been long died out. And they showed that species that had a slow metabolism had a higher chance of surviving or of staying existing for a longer time than species with a slower metabolism. So that's how you get, like, it's almost like maybe when you were little, you had this game where you would start with a sentence and you go around and whisper the same sentence, and then at the end of the line, the sentence would be completely different. Well, that's what you see happening here, and this still happens, especially in this kind of magazines, unfortunately, still quite often.
I mean, I think this one probably goes into the category of it's good for making money more than for political.
Yeah. People like to read this kind of stuff, and
well,
probably
who wouldn't be happy with a conclusion like this, especially in the Corona time?
Yeah,
we're forced to be kind of lazy and sedentary.
Yeah, and I don't think that this women's magazine has deliberately spread this falsehood. They probably have read it somewhere in an American magazine, and it has gone from there into this kind of mess up.
I'd like to invite everybody, if you have any more questions, we do have some more time, so you can put those in the chat, or again, you can ask Shannon directly. I do have one last question that I've come up with myself, which is, what was the most sneaky fake news that you ever came across that really just a total head scratcher that seemed to be so true, so real, and really took a lot of work to kind of take apart? Because the example you just gave us was that's an obvious, like, well, you know, probably not. But there's got to be others out there that are very well sneakily made.
Yeah, there are like more complex issues. I've written an article, whether it's well, just press that there was the question: is it that we can just have less nature, and then EU is fine with it, and then we don't have to do anything. So we just take away some nature, and then we're good. And then I talked to like multiple people, like, is that legally allowed? Are we able to do that? Well, we weren't able to do that, but there are like lots of little hard, like legal matters in this kind of fact check, which I find quite hard to do, and also quite fun. And also, often I find pictures quite difficult. At the beginning of the Corona crisis, it's more like trivial, but there's a lot of pictures of nature is restoring with dolphins in Venice and that kind of stuff. And then you have a lot of trouble pinpointing where exactly this is. It's like almost this kind of, I don't know if you know Bellingcat, this kind of, yeah. You need to use their methods of really like what building is there on the background, that kind of stuff. That's really challenging.
Yeah, I'm telling you, nobody's got time for that. Sounds like a lot of work. We do have one last question from Sarah in the chat. Which media are having in the Netherlands fact checkers like yourself? But I think you already answered this. Maybe you can answer it again.
Yeah, no, I can explain really quickly. You have NU.nl is doing mostly social media, some other subjects. Of course, you also have the Volkskrant, NU.nl. And the Volkskrant and NRC, which are two big newspapers, also have a fact-checking part, but they don't do it as regularly and not on social media. So more on what politicians had said, or that kind of stuff. And then you have true press bureaus that are DPA and AFP, who are doing fact checking in Dutch for Facebook. So they're not news outlets themselves, but they do fact check in Facebook partnership.
Okay, that's quite a bit. That's more than I thought. You know, it sounds like you can use all the help you can get. You know, Delft, where a lot of us are very rational, very factual, like yourself. Is there a way, would you recommend to anyone studying in Delft, for example, to go into your line of business? And otherwise, in a general way, how can people help support you and other fact checkers?
Well, I think if you studied in Delft, you need the sort of right background, as most that come from either more technical sciences, but also social sciences. It helps if you can read a paper and think rationally and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that would definitely you have the right background to do it. Let's say that if you can write as well, because that's also quite important, that you are able to explain a difficult subject in easy words. That's quite important as well. Definitely do that. And I can use like quite a lot of help, but often it's already really helpful if someone, especially with photos, I always check like the comments beneath a photo if something's going viral, because I know there are a lot of citizens who are indeed like as a hobby doing this fact checking by themselves and saying, no, this photo was taken there, and that really helps me getting like on the right track to fact checking a photo like that.
Right.
So if you see something, of course, you can also just email me to factcheck@nu.nl. If you see something, but also if you reply in the comments, I'll be if I go fact checking, I'll be sure to check it.
All right, great. This you're inspiring some citizen journalism.
Yes.
Cool. Well, we are now at the end of our time. This has been a wonderful presentation, and it's been great getting to ask you all these questions, because I really wanted to know more about what you do. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us, and especially thank you to you, Shannon, for explaining to us what you do for your job.